Alright guys, so today I'm going to be walking you through my pick for the absolute best PvE build in patch 1.5. Now this is for a variety of reasons. This build is not the absolute best in any one category, but it is top tier in every category. And that is why I'm choosing it as my personal pick for the best PvE and possibly the best PvP build in patch 1.5. But we're going to focus on PvE for right now. Now this is going to be my go-to build on live streams in pretty much every situation where I have to try extremely hard, or I have to focus, or I have to do a lot of damage, or I have to survive. It's going to be my pick for every circumstance, and that's why I'm continuing to showcase this gear set, because I believe it to be one of the most diverse, versatile, and fun gear sets in the game at this time. Now, for anyone that doesn't already know, that is the D3 F&C set, the Defense or Frontline set, and it allows use with the 4-piece talent of an SMG while a ballistic shield is equipped. Now, this is an extremely powerful bonus. However, the SMG crit chance is reduced to 0%. Now, there's some subtle ways around that, but I'll address that in a moment when I talk about my talents. So to start off with, I'll talk about all of my gear. I'll talk about my weapon here. It's an MP7. I'll move on to my skills, my talents, and then I'll kick it over some gameplay that I believe showcases the build extremely well. To start with, we're going to have a ratio of 3 to 2 for this build template with 3 firearms and 2 stamina pieces. Now, which pieces those are does not matter as long as 3 to 2 is maintained. I'm going to start with talking about my gear sets. We have D3 F&C holster with low rolls. I would prefer over 1250 in all 3 categories, and that is what others should strive for as well. At least over 1200. I'll be still farming for another better holster to augment this build. And then for major attributes, until they rework the existing armor system, it's going to be armor across the board everywhere you can roll it, period. So make sure to roll it on your holster right there. Moving on to your knee pads, the same story goes. I have a decent stamina roll here, over 1200, and armor in the major attribute slot. Moving on to the minor attribute slots, I have increased kill XP, enemy armor damage, and blind and def resistance. Enemy armor damage is ideal here, but I would prefer increased kill XP and blind and def resistance to be switched over to shock and burn resistance. Moving on to my mask, this is a great mask. I have a nice firearms roll, I have health in the major attribute slot, and I have enemy armor damage in the minor attribute slot. Again, stacks on top of my existing enemy armor damage and makes it that much more effective. For the major attribute, if you're only going to be participating in PvE, I would suggest re-rolling this to damage to elites. However, this does translate to PvP, so I have suggested and I opt to use health in the major attribute slot on my mask now for PvP builds. Just a personal preference though. Moving on to my gloves, it's important to redefine what the god roll is with the D3 F&C set when participating in PvP. This is no longer going to be a god roll of critical hit chance, critical hit damage, and then weapon damage of the gun of your choice. This is going to switch because you can't crit with the SMG using the shield, except for one specific way around that, or actually 2, but one specific mechanic around that. That means that the god roll has been redefined to something else. For major attributes, I have damage to elites, I have SMG damage, and then I have health on kill. Now, the one thing that you can switch is health on kill to critical hit damage. And now, while you're not going to maintain your base level of crit with like weapon mods and something similar, you are going to be able to use an ally's pulse or the precision talent to get crits with your SMG, which means critical hit chance is off the table, but critical hit damage does have some utility and burst potential in PvP. So stacking that and rolling off health on kill to critical hit damage is going to have some value in a squad type gameplay in PvP. However, it's not going to have much value across the board, and health on kill is going to have much more value in PvE. So this is what I've opted to run as my set of gloves for my particular version of a god roll. Now, I have a great stamina roll on these. I would prefer all of my gear be over 1250, but no dice there, and I'm still farming. And moving on to my 2 high ends. Here I have the specialized backpack. Adds 200% of firearms and stamina to skill power. I believe this to be super valuable in pretty much every single build, because in most DPS builds, you're going to maintain over 10,000 to 11,000 firearms and stamina combined, which means directly over 20,000 skill power just from this talent. That's unconditional skill power. It's going to be active at all times, and it doesn't rely on being at full health like similar backpacks or any other conditions to be met. It's something that you can rely on. It's always going to be active, and it's very, very potent. The major attribute, always going to be armor. This is a decently rolled firearms backpack. I could get a little bit higher, and the only reason it's showing as that high is because my mods, but I'll go over that in a second. Armor in the major attribute slot, and then ammo capacity in the minor attribute slot. That's really a quality of life thing, and the same way that Alpha Bridge affects your ammo capacity in the sense that both guns are the same type, D3 F&C, you really are going to rely on using an SMG with that shield. So if you run out of SMG ammo, your build is going to be hindered significantly. In fact, it's going to be almost useless, especially in a composition where you need to be soaking aggro as well as dealing damage, because you're not going to be able to hold the threat and maintain your threat levels without bullets in your magazine And if you can't deal damage, then the NPCs are going to gravitate back towards attacking your teammates. Moving on to your chest piece. Now, this is one of the really interesting items in patch 1.5, Barrett's Bulletproof Vest. You can get this from farming Lexington Event Center, which is right down here at the bottom right-hand corner of the map. I would suggest going there immediately and farming until you have one of these. It can take a while, so patience is key, but once you do have one, it's very, very powerful. Now, the talent here, Barrett's Bulletproof, no skills on cooldown increases skill power by 10%, and the way this interacts with the shield is very good because when you hold your shield out in front of you, it is not on cooldown, so it does not count towards this bonus. One skill on cooldown increases damage by 5%. Again, this is very helpful because while your shield is active deployed in front of you, it is not on cooldown, which means when you pop your booster shot, not only are you getting your booster shot damage and mitigation, you're also beginning to proc this Barrett's Bulletproof bonus of 5% damage. And when two skills are on cooldown, increases armor by 10%. That means when your shield is destroyed, or you automatically throw it away, or however you choose to make that skill go on cooldown, you will then proc your 10% additional armor. So when you don't have your giant barrier in front of you, you then are significantly increased in the toughness category, so you can survive PvP or PvE encounters without that shield while you get it back off of cooldown to deploy it again. Really, really great chest piece. Now, talking about all of my mods for a second, this is a great rolled firearms chest piece, by the way. And for major attributes, I forgot to cover those. I have health and armor. I would prefer health and armor always for PvP, especially. Armor is the unequivocal, categorical best in slot here. You're always going to roll it. But health, if you don't want to be in PvP and you're only going to be fighting NPCs, you're actually going to re-roll that to damage to elites. The same as your mask. However, if you are going to be in PvP, then keep it on health or EDR or something similar that's going to have more value in PvP. Moving on to minor attributes, ammo capacity is really great. When I pair it with my backpack, I'm actually capable of achieving over 1,800 rounds for my SMG. That's a quality of life thing. I'm unlikely to ever run out of ammo, which is really, really nice. And now talking about all my mods, I have firearms with armor in every single mod slot that I have. There's 2 in my chest piece, there is 1 in my mask, there is 1 in my knee pads, and there's 1 in my backpack. Now to talk about my performance mods, in my backpack I have ballistic shield damage, I have ballistic shield health, 1 of each. Moving on to my knee pads, I have ballistic shield health, and then moving on to my holster, I have ballistic shield damage resilience. I would actually advise you to run a 2 and 2 of ballistic shield damage resilience and ballistic shield damage. I would actually strongly advise people not to run ballistic shield health because pound for pound, it's weaker than the other 2. I don't actually have 4 of either ballistic shield damage resilience or 4 of ballistic shield damage, or even 2 and 2. I only have 1 of each, so that's why I have some ballistic shield health, but it's a primary application of the build, and you can make it significantly better by switching those out and running more damage with more damage resilience. It's going to make you much stronger. Now to talk about my weapon and the mods that I have on that weapon. It's an MP7 for the really, really high RPM. The mag size is okay, but there's a couple talents I'm going to be using to get around the reduced mag size over other SMGs. The damage isn't going to break anyone's back, 16.5, but the important thing to note is the talents on it and the way that I've modded it. So the first talent to note is Brutal. Since you're going to be face tanking right in front of a target almost every single time, you're going to land nothing but headshots. So Brutal is hyper effective here. Destructive is very valuable because it not only increases your damage drastically to enemy NPCs for a portion of their health bar, it also now directly translates to PvP. So I would not really recommend rolling this off. It's very valuable in both categories. And then Responsive in the third slot. You can switch this out. Again, if you're going to only be participating in PvE, then you can switch this out for something like Ferocious. But Responsive, since you are going to be within 10 meters pretty much all the time, even though you can deal significant damage from range, it's going to be hyper effective again, and damage increased by 10% when closer than 10 meters. That's going to be a large bonus to the output that your MP7 can deal against NPCs especially, and against players in a lot of PvP scenarios. Now talking about the weapon mods, this is actually an interesting thing here. You're going to mod it differently than most other gun types because of the fact that you can't crit. Now, for my magazine, I have mag size, critical hit chance, rate of fire. I do not want critical hit chance here. If I could get a better magazine, I would have one. Something to replace that would be much better. However, the rate of fire and the magazine size are the 2 very critical core components of this magazine that make it valuable to run in that slot. Moving on to my optic, I have accuracy, critical hit chance, and headshot damage. Again, critical hit chance I don't want here because it's useless. Accuracy and headshot damage are very valuable though. I would prefer to actually have headshot damage in the primary slot and have about 15 to 18% of it, and then have accuracy and stability in the next 2 slots. I think that would be very, very valuable. I don't actually have an optic that has that right now though, and that's just an improvement that can be made down the line for your build or for my build in the future. Small muzzle brake, I have stability, accuracy, headshot damage. Again, I would prefer headshot damage to be in the primary slot, but this is great. It doesn't have any critical hit chance or critical hit damage, which means I'm going to get all of these bonuses, and they're all going to actually be active on the gun. And then for my underbarrel, I have accuracy, critical hit damage, and reload speed. Accuracy to close up that, bullet spread, allows me to land more headshots from farther away. Critical hit damage, not very valuable, but reload speed is very nice, especially when coupled with the assault shield, which I'll talk about in a second. So that's how I choose to mod this gun. There are some small improvements that can be made, but it's very, very effective from range, from up close. The high RPM on, this MP7 with 950 plus 51, over 1,000 RPM, very reminiscent of 1.1 and 1.2. Very valuable, and I like it a great deal. Moving on to my skills, we have Booster Shot. Now, I have opted for this over Overdose because of the increased damage and damage resistance. I'm not going to be soaking that much damage from behind my shield, so the damage resistance not only helps me, but also applies to the shield and keeps it alive longer, so that's the primary reason. And the increased damage just helps my burst potential. It allows me to face trade with NPCs, kill the hardest enemies in the game extremely quickly, and if I'm in a PvP situation, I can pop it and trade with enemy agents, and it's very unexpected the amount of damage that I can deal. It's a very powerful healing skill, and I would advise running this over Overdose. However, if you do want to opt for something else like Overdose, that's personal preference, and it's going to serve you just fine. Moving on, we have Assault Shield. The Assault Shield is what I would recommend running for a Ballistic Shield modifier. However, reactive targeting is very strong as well. If you equip reactive targeting and an enemy shoots your shield, they will become pulsed, and this will allow you to crit. This is a mechanism to get around the 0% critical hit chance from the D3 FNC set, and you will be able to then mod your gloves or something like that with critical hit damage, or your MP7 itself with weapon mods. Higher critical hit damage, you'll be able to take advantage of the built-in critical hit chance on your damage on your SMG, and that will mean drastically increased burst potential in some PvP encounters. So reactive targeting is a viable choice. However, I have opted to run Assault Shield. Equips a shield that grants the user weapon damage increase, knockback, accuracy, and faster reload speed. The weapon damage is great across the board in every single situation. The knockback is very good for PvE because you can stagger NPCs and then reliably hit their head for a period of time, increasing burst potential. The accuracy decreases bullet spread for both PvP and PvE, very valuable. And the faster reload speed, coupled with the fact that you actually have a very small magazine size because you only have 41 in your magazine, is going to mean that you can reload and dish damage a lot more frequently with a super high RPM, and it's very, very powerful. Moving on to my signature, I have opted to run Tactical Link because pretty much every single kill that you get with the SMG while face trading from 5 meters away is going to be a headshot kill. There's no problem keeping your weapon on target, and there's no problem getting those headshot kills, which means your signature is going to come back extremely fast. So using something like Tactical Link in PvE is going to be more valuable than any of the others because it's going to increase your clear speed, but also if you are running in a squad, something like Recovery Link can be very valuable as well. Moving on to my talents, we're going to start with Critical Save. The 40% while low health and using a medkit is very, very essential to most builds now. Drastically increases toughness and is super valuable. So I would recommend running this on any build whatsoever, let alone just this build. Moving on to Combat Medic, this is a super powerful talent, especially in a group, but the reason you're going to be running it while solo and in a group is because when you heal group members and proxies within 20 meters by 40%, you're going to heal your shield as well by 40%. Not only that, but anyone that's running Combat Medic in your group is also going to heal your shield by 40% when using a medkit. This is extremely powerful and will result in 100% uptime on your shield even when fighting other players, especially if you're in a group. You can time your medkits properly and keep your shield alive a lot longer than it normally would be, pretty much through the course of any encounter. Moving on to On the Move, this is my third talent. Since you are going to be aiming down sights with your SMG and moving back and forth with your ballistic shield up right in front of enemy NPCs, you're going to maintain almost 100% uptime on the move. Every single time you get a kill and bounce from target to target, you're actually going to proc this bonus, which means 30% decreased incoming damage, which is very, very significant and increases your effective toughness and your operating toughness from right around 300,000 to significantly higher. And it's reliable. It's very easy to proc this bonus. Our last talent is going to be One is None. Now, since you are going to be right up close to a hostile, reliably landing headshots, One is None increases your damage by a huge margin, kind of an indescribable margin. 50% chance to reduce or to not consume the bullet means that your magazine is going to last significantly longer, and with such a high RPM, every single split second that you're still headshotting the hostile is going to have a huge impact on whether or not you can kill them. One is None is essential to the build. It's highly, highly, highly recommended that you run this. But that being said, if you really don't want to, if you really aren't able to land headshots that often, or if you're going to go into PvP and you're not with someone that has a pulse, I would recommend running Precision because you can headshot a hostile, pulse them for 10 seconds, and then it will allow you to crit even though you don't have any critical hit chance because of the D3 F&C set. That's one mechanism around the whole process of not being able to crit, and then you can take advantage of weapon mods that have crit, or your gloves if they do happen to have crit, etc. Moving on to my character sheet, there's only 3 stats here that are important to note. That's damage to elites, enemy armor damage, and then down to armor mitigation. The most important thing to note is armor mitigation, but we're going to start with damage to elites. 9% could easily be increased by an additional 28% if I were to roll damage to elites on my mask, on my chest piece, and then also roll ferocious on my gun. However, I am going to be using this build in both PvP and PvE, so that's an easy way to get increased PvE potential. However, I am using this in both different categories, so I have opted to sacrifice some damage to elites for overall utility. The next attribute to note is enemy armor damage at 34%. That's very powerful. That will equate to about 10% reduced player armor when I'm in PvP, which means their armor, if they, let's say they're at about 50%, is going to be effectively at 40% while I'm fighting them. That's very, very powerful enemy armor damage in PvP. If I am wrong about that modifier, I believe it's a 0.3 to 1 ratio, so 1 percentage point of enemy armor damage equates to 0.3% enemy armor damage or shred potential, and then 10% would equate to a roughly 3%. Enemy armor damage is very valuable in PvP, and I would recommend running it everywhere you can. That's why I've opted for more enemy armor damage and less damage to elites, because I want to have the cross utility and cross potential in PvP and PvE. And then for survivability, I have 52.83. That's right in the sweet spot. That is about what you're going to achieve between 52 and 54% when you roll armor on all your pieces of gear and then run it on all of your mods. It's a very powerful build, has a lot of armor, a lot of survivability, a lot of toughness since you're going to be operating a lot higher than this, proccing on the move or critical save, things like that. Very effective build, and those are the most important attributes to note while in your character sheet. Now I'm going to kick it over some gameplay and talk about the tactics and show exactly why I believe this to be the best PvE build, not only in terms of damage output, but survivability, and then why it also functions in the Dark Zone, and why I'm going to be using this as my #1 build for the rest of the patch. Okay, so here's some footage of me in World Tier 5 fighting the hardest enemies in the game, level 34 elite NPCs, in the Lincoln Tunnel Challenge Mode mission. I'm going to be standing out in the open, I'm going to be face tanking a large group of them, and at will, I'm going to be able to pick them off from range, from up close. I'm going to be able to recharge my signature. I'm not even going to pop it in this footage, but when you pop your signature, you can melt them in a fraction of a second, any NPC that you encounter. And since you're getting reliable headshot kills, if you walk right up to them and face tank, you're going to be able to recharge it very quickly. Due to the increased accuracy, the bullet spread is extremely tight. It's very, very tight groupings, and you're able to shoot enemies from range and kill them. It's got very high toughness, very high survivability. This is my pick for the absolute, hands down, most efficient PvE build out there. Not just because of damage. There are glass cannon DPS builds out there, other builds that have higher individual per bullet damage. However, this build has the introduced element of survivability, of increased toughness. You're going to be able to progress through solo missions of the hardest content, you know, the highest difficulty in the game, very easily, very reliably, and it is quite fun to do so. The super high RPM means that when I am landing headshots and then also proccing one is none, I can just keep sustaining my DPS output and do so much damage in such a very short period of time. This does directly translate to players. When fighting an enemy player, the same sort of thing ends up happening. If you land headshots with 1,000 RPM, they don't even have to be that strong. They are very strong due to the fact that you're running Assault Shield and have Booster Shot and have very high burst potential. But even if they're weaker damage per bullet shots, you're still going to be able to melt other players extremely fast, the same way that you're melting these NPCs. It's a very efficient build. Again, I would actually go so far as to say that I think this is one of the top builds in the game right now, especially for solo PvE, especially for group PvE, and also for PvP. It's really fun to use. I can't really say much more about it. I enjoy it a great deal. I've never seen another build that can stand out in the middle of a challenge mode mission so far in my experience in 1.5 and just face tank 10 or 20 NPCs at once and then pick one off every couple of seconds, regardless of where they are. Very efficient, very strong. Can't really say it enough. If you want to see me using this build live, check out our Twitch channel in the description below. We do, regular live streams. We have a lot of content. Check out our Facebook group in the description below. Check out our Discord link. We got the DZ911. We have a vibrant, Facebook community. We have our own custom Battlefield 1 servers. A whole bunch of stuff going on. Upper Echelon is growing at a really great pace. So if you like this build, if you like our content, drop a subscribe, drop a like, and make sure to follow, because we're going to be releasing a lot more content in patch 1.5 especially, and hopefully it's just as good as this and helps people and has a lot of information. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, have a nice night.